This episode of Arts Decoded is brought to you by No Wave Academy. No Wave Academy offers college-level art courses at a fraction of the price. Learn from some of today's best contemporary and fine artists. Arts Decoded is offering 10% off of all of their online courses. Go to No Wave Academy, that's NOH Wave Academy.com. Type in AD10 all caps at checkout for 10% off. They recently released a figure composition basics course taught by master oil painter Aaron Westerberg. They also recently released a course entitled Layering the Portrait in Oils, taught by recent Artist Decoded guest Mia Bergeron. So go to nowaveacademy.com, that's NOH Wave Academy.com. Type in AD10 all caps at checkout for 10% off. Now, on to the episode.
Life is a journey, and like saying with trying, just really, I guess, stepping up to it. It is a struggle. There's victories, there's defeats, but the thing is just to, constantly move forward through all of it. It's never easy. Like, how can it be? Because, you're talking about it's the nature of living, the nature of reality.
Hey everybody, this is your host Yoshino, and you're listening to episode number 149 of Arts Decoded. In this episode, I get the opportunity to talk to a kindred spirit, my brother from another mother, painter and tattoo artist Akira Beard. This conversation was done back in late January, a few days after Akira tattooed me, where blood, sweat, and tears were exchanged. But let me reiterate that minimal tears were shed from me in this 10-hour tattooing session. And as a modern man myself, I'm fully aware that men are only allowed to cry a single tear a year. I'm sure there's some sort of beautiful metaphor there about two brothers journeying into the unknown, meeting in person for the first time after years of communicating, and then the rite of passage where one tattoos the other to complete the journey. Or it could simply look like one dude tattooing the other at a tattoo convention in Pasadena, which was more so the case. But hey, this is an art program that you have tuned into, and we're going to make regular, everyday, mundane experiences turn into a beautiful metaphor and a melange of varying, precious, passionate, romantic ideologies. But all jokes aside, Akira is a peer that I deeply, deeply respect. And this conversation was very cathartic for me. And we touch on a lot of key elements that I think a lot of listeners will get a lot out of in regards to the overlap of life and art and the intermingling of the two. I want to read a passage to you from Akira's website. I'm reading this to you because it describes the depth of understanding and intention that Akira has discovered towards his art practice. This passage also reminds me of a few emails that he sent me in regards to his artwork. Making pictures is one of the earliest memories I recall. Before learning to write the alphabet, I was drawing from my imagination in crayons. And over all of the years that followed, there has never been a period where I didn't continue the practice. I remember, for example, just after graduating high school and living on my own as a dishwasher with no ambition in life but to get drunk and high. But when the party was over, I would be in the kitchen of a house I didn't live in, drawing past dawn. Or even when I was a student at the University of California Berkeley, on my way towards a corporate life, having never conceived even the possibility where art could be a profession, I filled my notebooks not with words from lectures, but with sketches of teachers and classmates. And though later I would become a professional artist, I sometimes look back at such moments if confused with the roots of my creativity. It started purely as an act of autonomy, where nothing outside myself influenced or affected it. I simply drew because I enjoyed it above all else. Sure, like anyone, I've had plenty of typical life experiences that have brought their own joy, but nothing compares in consistency and meaningfulness that making art has provided. Even during those unavoidable periods with living that challenge us most, drastic life change, loss, death, art has functioned as a medium with giving meaning to suffering, transforming it into an experience with healing. This, I hope, begins to describe the art I make. The drawings and paintings you see on this site are similar to snapshots where the lens points in life's direction with penetrating force. Every piece reflects a story only life could tell. Up until my middle 20s, it was enough to make art for its own sake. When I discovered making pictures offered so much more in such ways, a journey of exploration began. It fascinates to see how far it has come and continuing forward, never knowing where it may go. And that was a passage from Akira's website, a beautifully written passage that describes his artwork and the severity of his artwork and what it means to him and his life. But before we begin this episode, I would like to give a shout out to our friends over at Trickel. Trickel Art Supplies offers professional grade art supplies for all skill levels. Trickel has their own line of brushes and panels, but they also stock a small selection of other professional grade art materials to complement their products. If you're a beginner or a master, they can take the hassle out of struggling with your art materials, so you can focus on what matters most, and that is painting, isn't it? Because you want to paint and you don't want to have to struggle over these materials. Most orders ship within 24 hours of being placed. Free shipping on orders of $59 or more. And if you use the discount code AD5, you can get 5% off of all Trickel products. So go to trickel.com to place an order, or you can go on their Instagram and check them out at Trickel_art_supplies. And yeah, that is it. So, oh yes, before I forget, please go to our iTunes page and leave us a review, because it helps for viewers just like yourself to hear about this program. And we need those positive reviews from all of you lovely listeners, because it helps us stay on track and it helps us to get sponsors and this and that and so on and so forth, then yada, 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 because that is important to keep this program up. We appreciate your support, and I want to continue to get some solid artists on this program. And yeah, so without further ado, here is my conversation with Akira Beard for Artists Decoded. Hope you enjoy it.
Let's do it.
Yeah. How's it going? How are you? How's your day? How is the rest of the Tattoo Expo?
The rest of the expo, it was great, man. I'm glad it's over. It was an experience, and yeah, it just feels good today to really decompress. It ended yesterday, and it's kind of like getting into character or something, a different state of mind. So now I feel like I can just get back into a regular state and just, enjoy my coffee, like enjoy the morning.
Definitely.
Just,
yeah. What do you think is the difference between when you're tattooing people as opposed to when you're doing like work on paper or a drawing, or you're doing a painting? Do you feel like it's all kind of encompassing, or do you feel that you have a different mindset in different mediums?
It is a different mindset. There's one tattoo artist when I was starting. I remember he said, you want to get to the place where you don't even think about the person. And so in that situation, it would be just like canvas or paper, but I'm just not there yet. I'm just, maybe overly conscious that, this is a tattoo, it's permanent, it's on a person. I want to do a great job. But, ultimately, I think with anything, just getting into the space where you're just not conscious at all. You're just like so involved in the thing. But it's hard. It's hard when you're, I've been at this for just over a year. So I'm still in that space where I just have to think about things, as opposed to painting. I don't have to think. Drawing, I don't have to think.
Yeah.
It's just an act. But with tattooing, I'm still in that space. But I'm looking forward to that day,
Yeah.
where just tattoo.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's interesting because, especially when you're like taking on a newish medium. I mean, you've been doing it for a year, tattooing for a year now.
Yeah.
But there was even this thing that I read on Marlon Brando. I think I told you about it, when he would be on film sets and he would talk to someone. He would have like a legitimate like conversation about what breakfast did you have and this and this and that. And then immediately they would start the scene and then he would move over and just do his lines. I think that was a way for him to access the subconscious mind. And I mean, there's different writing exercises that you can do as well. Like, just immediately when you wake up and you're, in that subconscious dream state, to be able to bring out a piece of paper and just start writing things. But yeah, I think that's where a lot of the magic happens, is like being able to tap directly into the subconscious and not be so conscious about like why you're doing it, the reason why you're doing it, like as you're doing it. But what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it is magic in different ways. And it can be hard to access that, but I think it's a beautiful thing when you become aware of that. And for myself, through making art, I've become hypersensitive to that, especially with my drawings. With this process, it really feels like I'm dancing between the two, between the conscious mind, between the subconscious mind. So for example, I really try to start with like just a no mind state, like just I'll distract myself, even talk to somebody, but I'm drawing at the same time. And so the thing is, because even if I don't look at the paper, the conscious mind, it'll still, like with pattern, I'll find myself like, concerned with the result, doing what I've done before, even if you're not looking at the paper. So it's really fascinating to try to tap into the subconscious mind. But, like even just doing this podcast, it's like in the beginning, it's just like, like I'm conscious, I'm aware, but, just getting to that space where it's just like, you're just present, a sense of abandonment, just letting go and just being spontaneous. I think spontaneity is like a gateway to the subconscious mind.
Definitely.
So
yeah. I mean, that's why I like jazz musicians so much is, I think jazz is a metaphor for just good art in general, because you have all these technical abilities that you've accumulated over a certain amount of time, and you're able to understand and just react and be able to have, I mean, with jazz, it's you're having a conversation musically with other people, assuming that you're playing in a band or something. But yeah, I mean, I think that's just in life in general. It's like you're reacting to like the variables around you, and you're able to like through your sensibilities, like be able to eloquently or messily or chaotically like go about life in general. But
yeah, that's, it's a subject I'm obsessed with, like, the subconscious mind. I talk about it all the time. And for myself as an artist, that's one of the greatest rewards I've got from, my development as an artist, as a person, through my own process with making art, is discovering the subconscious mind. It just like, I just feel it's just the key to so many things, but it's so kind of like it's overlooked. To me, ironically, like when I experience, art, not my art, but, tattooing is a good example, because I think it demands it, that you have to rely more on your conscious mind. Like, what the result is from the very start, you know what I mean? And from, the way that I view it, like, in my creative process with the subconscious mind, it's the opposite. Like things are revealed to you from the process. And that's what I love. That's the magic of it. Like, like when I do a drawing, I have no idea what's going to appear on the paper, if anything. And I love that, as opposed to, leading up to that point for like over a decade, it was the opposite. Like I would have an idea. I want to do a piece about love, for example. So, consciously, I would just bring together materials, references, or whatever. But it's so overly conscious. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. No, earlier today, I was listening to this short stories and interview Audible book by David Foster Wallace.
Yeah.
And they were talking about, in this interview, how like when you're in the shower, you have all these interesting ideas, and then as soon as you go down to write those interesting ideas, then it just gets convoluted by your conscious mind. And I think there's something interesting when you're able to tap into that and make it a common practice.
Yeah.
Do you think that you found that through kind of like saying fuck you to like traditional academic ways of creating artwork, because you had an academic background, right? You went to school.
I went to school and learned techniques and stuff. No, I my relationship with that, like a lot of my relationship with art is so intentional. So I'm somebody that like I really learned the techniques of art. It was a means to an end. It was never the art itself. And I was just learning those techniques so that I would be able to go into my inner world and begin to figure out who I am. That's why I'm actually envious of people that could just paint still lifes for the sake of painting still lifes or portraits or whatever. And after more than 15 years of, that's been my journey, figuring out who I am through making art, very recently, like in the last year, I found myself painting still lifes. Like I went to the supermarket, I bought some meat, put it on a plate.
I was
just inspired by the colors.
Yeah.
And that's a breakthrough. One of my friends, he really recognized that. He was really happy for me because he knows that, it might sound silly, but, that's not easy for me to do. Like I wish I could just, just paint an apple or an orange, but I find it just painfully boring. And so to get to a place, it really reflects a major accomplishment like within me, that it doesn't have to always be trying to figure out who I am, and I'm loving that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, do you think that's because as you're, getting more mature in your career as an artist, whether you want to call it a career or not, but, more mature and resolute in yourself as a person and as an artist, do you think that you have found some sort of peace in what you do and you're able to allow yourself to explore different ways of thinking, even doing a still life and having some sort of like, maybe it's a meditative practice or something, to be able to just look at the still life and recreate it? Like what's your approach on that?
Yeah, I definitely, I'm really confident that through art, like I said, over 15 years, like it was so intentional that, I began with a certain place using art to begin to figure out who I am. And just like every piece of art that I made in that time, there's a story behind it. Like it wasn't just for its own sake. And in that process, it was definitely, an evolution like of my consciousness, like just working out stuff, like in psychology, I'm really into psychology. And like a thing I remember, learning about therapy. Like there's the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, and they form the psyche. And basically, a person, I'm generalizing, like they go to therapy when there's an imbalance. And often it's a lot of repression, like anything you can't deal with consciously, something happens to you, whatever, it could be big or small, you repress it, you put it into your subconscious mind. And so it's like sweeping things under the rug, it begins to build. And I had a ton of that because of my background as, from childhood, just coming from a really repressed background with my family where we just didn't express who we are at all, like physically or emotionally. And so that's where I began to use art out of necessity. I was very fortunate to come across like art in that way, like through a mentor in art school that really began to just, that showed me that way, that you could use these techniques you're learning not to solve aesthetic problems on a canvas, but you could actually use it to explore ideas. And for me, the most important idea was to work out all that stuff. But in that process of working out all that stuff, that's the achievement. I have achieved a certain type of piece. That's why I can get into tattooing without like judging it or anything, like I had a lot of issues with money, not that that's wiped clean, but like art and money. It's through the process, like I made art about my issues with money, you know what I'm saying? And so like in this process, like the ground's been made fertile where I'm just so open and it's very sincere. And that's why, like, to me, it's like, it's such a special thing, like, just art, like my relationship with it, is such a major achievement. No one else could see that, it's just like, it's so much me, but like people call me like, like Zen, easygoing and this and that. that wasn't always the way. Most of my life, there was so much turmoil. But I'm very confident, like it was through art. And if you looked at like my library or whatever, like those, like, in the beginning, it was so intense. Like there'd be stuff like painting. I remember this one piece, like really early on, I wrote the lyrics to John Lennon's song, "Woman is Nigger of the World." And I use references of like, pornography, like, men and women having sex, painting this stuff, putting it on a canvas with me holding a revolver, like just like overly intense. It was like just working all this crap out. You know what I mean? And now it's just like, it's funny when I look back at that stuff, because like I said, that's the evolution to get to a point. Like I didn't plan to paint still lifes recently, but it's just like, I no longer feel the necessity to like paint anything like that, the pornography revolver thing or whatever. It feels so good just to like be inspired by color alone. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting being like really interested in like psychology and philosophy, for instance, and having this sort of existential dread, but understanding the sort of the ideas of the existential as well, but being kind to yourself through the process.
Yeah.
Because really on this planet, like no one has answers, we think we do, but there's nothing that is a resolute solution to where we're going to go after this life so we're all just kind of floating in this mysterious abyss of different questions that we have and different realizations that we come to. But at the end of the day, it's like, what does it mean? I don't know.
That's pretty deep, man.
And now we're going to figure this out.
Well, it's like when I think of I felt like I told this to you recently. I don't know. When I think of spirituality, I just think of like, it's so, I think of absolute simplicity. And so the thing is, like, I remember hearing this in like some Zen story or something where like a rock, if a rock can't think, but it says something like a rock, it has no confusion that it's a rock. A rabbit, you're not going to see a rabbit like try to act like a bear or whatever. But a human, it's just like, it's so conflicted. Like, and the confliction is all these stories it creates. And so that's the thing. You can create these stories about God, the universe, or whatever. But to me, it's just like spirituality. It's like getting to that absolute simple place, like the rock. Like these things aren't so loaded or whatever. And it's just like life itself. It's just so simple. And I think that's the symbolism of like a child. A child gets it, like how they're naive or whatever. But then it's just like they begin to learn these stories through institutions, through family, through media. And then the world becomes so different. And it's like there's the world itself, which is the real thing or whatever. And then there's the filter of the stories of the world, and that becomes a person's reality. And that's what I was saying, like in my own process, is working through all these stories to get to a place where it's so simple. You know what I mean? And I love that. And I'm so grateful that I could, get to a place, and it's still constant work for sure. But, in this lifetime, just to like be able to appreciate like anything, like, eating my food, the taste of the coffee, this interview, like being present for it. You know what I'm saying? That
definitely.
Not all these, convoluted stories in my mind surrounding it.
Yeah, so. Definitely. I guess that's when I was talking about the existentialism, like being existentially kind to yourself as well, being understanding of the teachings of our world, and it's like, what do you do with that? Because anyone can be well read, and they can read like thousands and thousands of books, but at the end of the day, are you utilizing that knowledge for your benefit? Or are you utilizing it to shape this perspective of the world that can be negative, that will be inevitably detrimental to you?
Yeah, I think that could work for you or against you. That's the thing with knowledge, right? It's like, knowing too much or whatever. It's funny you bring up someone like David Foster Wallace. Like, I've never, read his books, but I've, listened to like all the interviews. It's not like there's that many like on YouTube. And a thing that I take from him, it's amazing, like how much he is in his head. You know what I mean? It's just like in the interviews, it makes me uncomfortable to watch. And it's that thing, man. It's just kind of like with like knowledge, like he's, how I see him, like he's so aware of just like in a beautiful way of the culture that he was living in, like, you know, with being in a modern culture, like capitalism and all that or whatever. And it's the thing, like, you know, like myself too, just by my character, you know, maybe my nature, I'm just so curious, like, about the world. And it really took me to a negative place. Like, I'd read up on it or whatever, but it was just me being in my head. Like, I wasn't living in the actual world, and that became my reality. But that was the thing, like, at some point, like, I would take, you know, I'm into philosophy as well, it's psychology, and the practice became about taking these things and applying them into the world so they could be tested. Like, does this idea hold or it doesn't, you know? So, like, an example that comes to mind, like, there was a time when I was really resistant, I was really judgmental about commercial art in my own way. And I had this realization that it's just a judgment. Like, how do I know? I haven't done the thing. How can it not be a judgment? So I had some experiences, you know, like I did a thing with Red Bull, for example, and I judged the thing. I was just like, you know, artists don't do that. Artists don't work with Red Bull. But then I was like, you know what? This would be a situation to test it. And I did it. And, you know, lo and behold, like, I didn't feel like I sold out or anything. Like, I was able to do what I do, stay true to myself. And so I proved the idea wrong. You know what I mean?
I totally know what you mean. Yeah. I think, you know, sometimes we have going into a situation like that, we have these certain preconceived notions about, you know, the outcome of something. And I just think that, you know, I think I was talking about this the other day about living life with limited expectations, because I specifically say limited because I feel like it's kind of a cliche when people say, oh, no ego, you know, live life with no ego, or live life with no expectations. I mean, we're all conscious beings that, you know, we have certain experiences, but to limit that idea, because, you know, I feel like expectation kills joy in a lot of ways, you know, because if you expect, like, even dating, for instance, let's just use that as an example. If you're dating someone and, oh, you know, you have this sort of like mindset of where things are going to go, right? And you break that down, like a first date, second date, third date, or however you create it in your brain, then you're expecting the outcome and you're not allowing yourself to be present in that moment. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a friend that comes to mind in that way. It's like painful to watch. And again, you know, the subconscious mind comes into it. But, you know, he would just be stumbling in that way. Like, it was a priority in his life. One of his goals is to be in a long-term relationship. He had no problem, like, meeting and dating women, very, you know, like, attractive guy and everything. But he would tell me about it, and it just wasn't working out at all. And what it was is that the expectations he put, like, on the person before they even went on the first date, and how can, like, anyone meet those expectations? And again, it goes back to the thing. It's just like letting go of that conscious control and just allowing the possibilities. Like, when you let go, you know, the possibilities, who knows what they will be, but that can be terrifying. But I think, you know, like with art, like, it's really, you know, like, I've really learned it from that with the creative process of it can be downright painful if you're so controlling with, like, you know, I think when people do portraits, I think it's not uncommon because you want the likeness, you want it to be, you know, perfect or whatever. Even if you achieve that result, it's just like, it's painful, you know what I mean? But there's something like, you know, when you let go of that and the thing paints itself or whatever, it's a totally different experience. And so to apply that to life and, you know, like any situation, you know, like dating or whatever, it's just like, it's a beautiful thing. Like,
definitely.
Like, I've had that experience where I remember there was a person I was really attracted to. And I've been in that situation where I try to control it, manipulate it, like, you know, get the person, and I have. But it's so different when you don't do things that way. And so with this one specific person, it was a failure, you know, like, I was just like, I'm going to let go, I'm going to be myself. And like, it didn't work out. Like, the person had no interest in me because, you know, I was talking about my ex from the start, you know, like, just from the very start. And it's just, but it was painful, like, just in the way, like, you know, that I didn't get what I wanted or whatever. But at the end of it, I patted myself on the back because I was just, I guess, just sincere and true in the way of just kind of just allowing myself just to be or whatever without pretense, without trying to, you know, control the situation. Yeah. So whether it works out or not, like, you know, I think it's a win-win in that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think being aware of our own internal monologue and understanding like our own thoughts and why we think certain ways instead of trying to project our feelings onto other people and try to, you know, because it is a relationship, for instance, is a conversation. You say something, especially like, you know, those first like, you know, I don't know, however long of dating in the beginning, right? You're trying to understand where they're coming from, and are they being honest with you, or are you being honest with them? And, you know, so I think like, and it all comes down to just value and how much you value yourself as a person, how much they value themselves. And I think like the more that you have an absolute understanding of your own value as a person and understand what you want in your life and what you don't want in your life, I mean, it can be transitional to artwork as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do think, you know, speaking of like, you know, going back to like the academic background and things like that, you can't write poetry if you only know 3 words in English.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to understand like certain technical things to be able to express those technical things and to be able to allow those to craft your most honest expression, I think.
Yeah,
Right?
I agree with that. It's funny that you say like, you know, like you're describing like, like poetry, learning the language, the grammar, the technical part. Because when, you know, when I think of like painting and drawing, that's the symbolism I use, you know, like, it's just it's a visual language. And so you learn the vocabulary, the grammar. The more you know, the obvious part is the more ability you have. But then the other part to that is, you know, that's what I was saying for myself. It was a means to an end. It was like building a foundation of ability so that I would be liberated to say whatever I want to say, however I wanted, you know, to say it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like if you learn, like you want to learn like German or something and you have no background in German, if you just learn, you know, like slang, you're going to be very limited, as opposed if you take it from the, you know, the ground up. You learn all the boring stuff, you know, as much grammar, structure, vocabulary. You're going to be able to talk in slang, poetry, formal, informal, etc. And so, like as a visual artist, I still do it, you know. That's why in tattooing right now, people, you know, that I know, they were excited for me, like that I'm going to jump right into doing my art. I'm like, no, I'm going to start off by doing tribal and, you know, stuff like that, like little hearts. I want to learn the basic things. So then at some point I'll be able to really, I'll have the ability to express myself, you know?
When you first started doing art in earnest, was that a conscious understanding at that time that you were going to accumulate these skills to be able to utilize that to express yourself? Or was that more in hindsight now that you have time and you have distance to be able to reflect on that?
It was more of a, it's both. When I first went into art school, it wasn't so immediate, because before art school, like it was my my early 20s, and I had, up to that point, I had no experience with there was no art school. There wasn't the internet. There wasn't YouTube, like all that stuff. So I had no exposure. I was my own audience for the most part up until that point. And so art school, my mind was just like blown, you know, like I didn't even know who Rembrandt was up until art school. And so just the technical part, it was so exciting. But like it quickly reached a point, because like I was saying, I just kind of had my own, you know, like demons or whatever. And so technique wasn't enough, like after like maybe 2 years. And I just happened to have met like a certain person, and he just like opened those doors, the possibilities that this could be like something beyond technical stuff.
What did he say to you? Do you remember?
He didn't say something specifically. It was just more, our sessions were really like therapy sessions. The class would be over, and we would just hang out. The last student would leave, and we would just talk. And, you know, he was so open and so vulnerable and so spontaneous, and there was no subject off limits. And again, like, you know, coming from my background, like growing up, that was my baggage. Like, so it made sense I'd be attracted to someone like that, because he was the opposite of anything I had ever known up until that point. I was like, wow, you know, like he just, revealed himself like not only so fluidly, but just I got to know him so quickly in that way, and that became a model for me. And so from that point, with his guidance, the techniques of art, like then it became an intentional, conscious choice where I'm going to use these techniques to begin that journey, you know, of going inwards. And that's where I really differentiate, where I began to make art, as opposed to, I'd been drawing my entire life. Like before learning to write the ABCs, I was already, you know, drawing pictures. But up until that point, I would say that was just drawing. And then from, you know, applying these ideas, that's where I began to make art. And that's where it's been probably 16, 17 years, maybe, because that was 2003. So like I said, I could, you know, tell you the time, the place. It's very intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting when you meet someone, you know, it's almost like serendipity. You meet someone at that specific time, or you hear that thing, whatever it is, and it unlocks something within you, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the key, like vulnerability is the key to a lot of things, but unconditional love. And whether that's inwardly, like in yourself, or within other people, you know, because it always starts from that inner, those inner ideas and that inner monologue as well, you know? But I was curious, like, so prior to meeting him, this, need I say mentor, maybe, mentor figure?
His name's Christopher.
Christopher.
Yeah, we call him Christopher.
Christopher. All right. So Mr. Christopher.
Yeah.
Prior to meeting him, so were you, did you like harbor a lot of your feelings, or what do you think was kind of eating away at you?
Yeah, it was just a lot of confusion. I had no relationship with my emotions. To give a soundbite of my background, when I say, you know, coming from a repressed childhood type thing, like I love my family, my immediate family. My parents are still together. I have an older brother, younger sister, but fundamentally, I have no idea who they are. I don't know their birthdays. We just didn't talk. It was so surface. It's like growing up and living with people, all they talk about is the weather, you know, like, oh, it's sunny outside, you know, that type of thing. And so there's no point of reference. And so that really formed my psyche as an adult. And so a lot of that came out like in my first relationship, which was, you know, 10 years. And I took her through the mud, unfortunately, because of that. So it was really confusing because like in art school, like I said, maybe I was 23 or something at the time, but I was just, you know, I was with like a partner that loved me like no one else, like had so much patience. I made the transition of dropping out of Berkeley and going like a corporate route to pursuing being an artist. I was in art school around all these like, you know, weird and fun art people, being exposed to like, you know, art in general.
Wait,
like,
you were prior to that, sorry, you were going into a corporate route?
Yeah, I was going to Berkeley. I was a year and a half away from finishing a degree in Japanese and business, where my goal was to move to Japan and climb the corporate ladder and be successful and make money. Nothing to do with art. So that it was repressed. Like everything was repressed, man. And so when I went to art school, like things just began bubbling, and I was just reaching a point where I was so unhappy, and it was confusing because all that stuff I was saying, I'm in art school with this partner, all this, I'm in San Francisco. Everything was just like lovely, but it was confusing because every day it was like carrying a weight. And that's where, when I met this guy, things began to slowly make sense. That weight was, I just never expressed myself. That partner I was with, I never shared my feelings, that type of thing, because there's no point of reference. I didn't know people do that, you know? And that sounds crazy, but that's the truth.
No, it's not. That doesn't sound crazy.
Yeah.
I've definitely been in a relationship before where it was a long-term, we might have talked about this before, but it was a long-term relationship where, we didn't share our feelings with each other. And I think partially it had to do with just both of our upbringings, you know, just not really expressing yourself in that way. And because of that, you know, the relationship failed. And it's interesting to just think back on those things, but also thinking back on those things with kindness to ourselves, because we only knew what we know at that particular time. And we can only let those teachings guide us into the future to not make those mistakes historically within ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, yeah, man.
But yeah.
So we're going to talk about how to make a painting now, right? And like you mix red with blue.
Yeah.
Warms and
Yeah.
cools.
Yeah, exactly.
This is an artist podcast, right? That's what artists do.
No. This is a therapy session. You stepped on the wrong podcast, my friend. This is not Artist Decoded. This is Artist Decoded X therapy session. I don't know. So yeah, just interesting to understand like the mind behind the piece. I think that's much more interesting. But yeah, let's talk about let's see. So you mix cadmium red with what? Yellow ochre or something, phthalo blue. Okay, yeah, that's right. Okay, and that's how you make a painting. That's just it.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Phthalo blue, yellow ochre,
secret,
and cadmium red. Yeah.
Really makes the piece pop.
Yeah, really makes a piece pop. But don't mix it around too much; it gets too muddy. Yeah. Unless you want that. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, it was really an awesome experience getting tattooed by you, man. Yeah, I think that moment was certainly a pivotal moment for the year.
Yeah. No, that's really cool, man. Like the fact that you came out to a tattoo convention and got tattooed on the spot there, that's just like I really admire that. That's I know it's not easy, it's not comfortable, but I mean it shows a lot of character. Like I really like that. And the tattoo thing itself, my values tend to be more internal as opposed to like surface rewards or whatever. And so like with tattooing, I love the experience, the intimacy, like tattooing someone, like having, not to sound gross, but, your blood is on, or their blood is on your hands. The conversations at the same time sometimes get personal, as it did, with you and I, just like the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm just talking. The whole thing's so, it's connecting. And I love that. That's not always the case. I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. So I never, it's really about them. I enjoy that about tattooing as well. But yeah, I really enjoyed it also. And it's something that I love about tattooing is that experience. And getting paid for it's icing on the cake. It's like, it's just one of those things, man. It's just like, it's a dream, really. And man, like, just getting, and the challenge of getting better at it. And
Definitely.
All of it's just, it's all positive, like, it's all very positive. And I really feel blessed to have come across it, or it came into my life or whatever. I just never imagined that I would be tattooing, be at a convention or whatever. I told you I have no tattoos or whatever. And yeah, man, it's a trip.
Yeah. Do you think being able to utilize tattooing as another medium to essentially, I mean, it sounds like you're also not just using it for, a personal gain, but also to be able to interact with people and, you're doing a service for someone as well. Do you think that those ideals help you balance out your artwork, like your personal artwork, and gives you kind of like a happy medium between the two?
I think it's giving me some space because my art, my relationship with it became so integrated. There was no separation between living and art making. And I started to experience the consequences of that because there's no escape. And it became kind of scary in the way, like I would talk to a friend and he has his own business on the side and he's an amazing artist, but he could step away from his art, go to his business. I didn't have that. And so if my art wasn't working, I'm in my process and it's, I'm just not, it's not coming together. I would wrestle myself to make it happen. I'm having trouble describing what I want to say, but there was really no escape because even if I'm not painting, I'm still making art. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so with tattooing is providing this space. I have to be careful, because already there's been situations where I lose track of that and I'm bringing already too much of the my own artistic side into it. So an example was when a client walked into the shop, somehow we got into a conversation. He saw my art online and thought I'm an amazing artist and he wants to be tattooed by me, but he doesn't want the typical tattoo or whatever. He wants me to do something just absolutely spontaneous, like my abstract pieces, like the whole thing of just like letting the subconscious make the piece. And so I got really excited and all of a sudden I'm in a different headspace. I'm not in that grounded, centered headspace of printing out a stencil, putting it on, following the lines, all that stuff. All of a sudden, like, his leg is like, I'm, in my hands, and I'm going to draw with a Sharpie the thing on his leg. And he asked me, so what are you going to do? And I'm like, well, I thought we're on the same page. I have no idea what I'm going to do. And so, he started getting a little concerned. And, it's like, that's what I mean. Then I started feeling really vulnerable because there's like experienced artists in the room, tattoo artists, and they're watching. They've never done anything like that. Somebody's been tattooing 10 years, you know what I mean? And it's just like, okay, I'm just going too far out there again. You know what I mean? And so
that's a conversation.
Yeah, I like the tattoo thing right now because it's grounding me. It's not, I don't want to go on to that kind of abstract place of nothingness.
Yeah.
And with my painting, it's fine.
Yeah.
But even with painting, it would go into crazy places because I would get lost. That was when I was a vagabond, no home, no job or whatever. And so then to add that layer of throwing myself into like the subconscious abstract painting, I mean, it would really take me into a place of always being in a psychedelic mind state or something. Where that's where things would start to kind of go downhill. Unfortunately, I'd forget to take care of myself. Like, living, not to sound gross, but living off of one pair of underwear for a month, like just drinking more than I eat, like, drinking beer, forgetting to eat altogether, like living in the back of a gallery, painting till I can't move my arm, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. It's just, I don't want to bring that into the tattoo thing. And I like that. I want the tattoo ultimately to support the art so that I can be safe and secure in the art, where I'm protected. You know what I mean?
Definitely. I mean, I think that there's a couple of things that I'm thinking about, but I mean, I think that's, like balancing out, like understanding Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and to be able to be self-actualized, you have to basically have your survival needs met.
Yes.
But I also think, like, for you, it sounds like tattooing is this idea between certainties and uncertainties. So you're certain that how you're going to do this tattoo, and like you're able to balance yourself because you can be uncertain and random and spontaneous with your artwork. So then you're able to toggle between the two.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think, you're talking about earlier about having it to where the tattoo becomes more subconscious, and I think right now it just sounds like you're sharpening your skill sets and understanding the techniques, and who knows, 2, 3, 4 years from now, it might be another story, and you feel very, very confident with your ability to tattoo on skin.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm confident it will. Actually yesterday, it was my first experience with that, what you just described, what I was talking about with, separating the art, the spontaneity, all that stuff with tattooing. And so yesterday I tattooed my first attempt at one of my paintings onto somebody, a friend, and it was on his hand. But, they had the stencils they had, they call it inkjet, and it's basically like transferring, is what we did with you, transferring a photograph onto the skin. You know what I mean? It's amazing. It didn't work so well with this design, maybe because it wasn't a photograph, it was my painting. And it was, like it was loose, it was abstract somewhat, even though it was a face. It was small. And so put it on his hand. And when I did the shadows, the dark shadows, that was fine. But the rest of it, I just couldn't see it. Because it's messy. There's all the ink. It's on the hand, so it's a little different. There's all this ink. There's blood. Keep wiping it. And so I'm wiping the stencil off. And so basically it got to a point where there was no stencil, and I've just started the tattoo. And so like I just had to. There's no choice. I had to approach it spontaneously. Even though like I have the reference that I'm going to follow, which is weird because it's my own painting, which is spontaneous. But it was fun. It was scary, but it was fun, to... there's no stencil there, and just kind of create things, as it goes along.
Yeah.
But I don't want to, I want to be, I have to control myself. I don't want to jump into that because I really need the grounding.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, a lot of things, the way that I structure it in my brain is calling it building blocks. And, slowly, or, baby steps maybe, slowly allowing yourself to step a little further and a little further. But as long as you're leaning in, and you're constantly leaning in and not shying away from things that make you feel uncomfortable, I feel like to be able to find comfortability and uncomfortability,
Yeah.
you'll grow tremendously from that, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it's your artwork or just life in general, to constantly be hungry for the knowledge or to constantly challenge yourself in certain ways, even if it's something that in that moment, the situation challenged you and you had to react.
Yeah.
You know, you could have totally lost it, or you could have leaned in and say, okay, well, this is a situation where I need to adapt. And you adapted.
Yeah.
You know? And although that's like kind of a microcosm of the human psyche, it's still something that builds over time. And I don't know, these are just things I'm aware of, and like, you know, just the beauty and nuance of things, like, and those like just little things, like, you know, you learn a new word or you learn a new way to paint or something.
I don't love being uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
I absolutely respect it and I value it like tremendously. And so, you know, I'm always putting myself in uncomfortable situations because my obsession is, you know, like, I really value the growth that comes from that. I almost feel like there's no other way for growth to really happen. And, you know, I want to grow as much as possible. And so, I don't love it. I don't, you know, I told you that I don't take, right now, I've been doing this for maybe 3 or 4 months. I've done this before, but I don't take hot showers. I only take cold showers. That's something I'm really liking about being in LA, is the water's really cold as opposed to Florida.
Yeah. Why did you start doing that?
Because I want to train myself to, you know, just be used to being uncomfortable. It's like just one part. I do other things as well, like waking up really early. It's all like, you know, it's a battle with the mind. Like every time I step in that shower, you know, I took 2 cold showers this morning. It's like the mind just right away, it's like it doesn't want to do it. You know what I mean? That's the training, is just to be transparent to that, just to walk right through it. And so it relates to that tattoo. I feel like it makes it, like we were just describing with being spontaneous, it helps me not freak out in that moment. It helps it like just to kind of put it in a context. Because with tattooing, I'm in that situation a lot, you know? And so it really helps. I learned something in that moment with that tattoo. The fear is there, you know, like every time. The shower thing, it contextualizes that. It makes this like a muscle that I can build. But, you know, like it really kind of sets the difference between like moving forward or just being complacent or even going backwards. You know, like an example was, and I do love that, you know, like even coming to this is my second convention, you know, just happened in Pasadena. Like the mind just starts to create all these negative stories and creates anxiety and this and that. And to do it in spite of that, you know, I think that's the definition of fearlessness. There's like fear's always going to be there, but acting in spite of the fear.
Definitely.
And so there was a bike week thing back in Florida with tattooing. And the guys would tell me stories about it, you know, the other artists, and none of them wanted to go. And, you know, my mind was just like, I don't want to go either. But, you know, like I went because it's like, you know, to tattoo like aggressive, like guys on motorcycles or whatever. And I had some experiences with that. And I value that in hindsight, where there were some experiences where I absolutely failed. There was one experience in particular where it's so intimidating. A guy, you know, a big like motorcycle guy was just like on me, questioning my tattooing before we even started, really testing me and really intimidating. And I use that as reference now, you know, if I get nervous with like a tattoo, that this big dude that was totally, you know, like, it's like he wanted to fight me or something, you know what I'm saying? And the irony is he wanted the fucking smallest tattoo, like on his like collarbone, you know what I mean? And I nailed it, you know, like I not only nailed it, but all this pressure, like he was just checking me. It's just that thing at the end of the day, at the end of my life, I could always look back that, you know, like I tried, like that was a success, but I've had plenty of failures, man. Like, and I will continue to, because there's no other way. Like with the tattooing, with making art, whatever, with dating, whatever it is, it's like, just to try over and over and over again. And I want to do that as much as possible. It's just like a way of living. And so like the cold shower, it just helps to kind of contextualize that, to like have a structure of that, a reminder, because it's so easy. I've been there, you know, where the other extreme of being complacent, of just like overeating, just watching Netflix, just like, you know, but underneath it is like, you know, when Thoreau said, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, I think he said. So underneath it, there's that quiet desperation. There's like, it's not satisfied. And so for myself, especially as a creative, you know, want to keep growing, but not just as a creative, as a person, there's so much to learn about myself, about the world.
Definitely.
And so that's how you do it, right? Like you throw yourself out there and over and over again. And man, it's just like even doing this podcast or whatever, it's like there's so many stories that come from it. There's so much substance and content. And as an artist, that becomes the medium, you know, just like a writer. It's like, if I don't have those experiences, what am I going to make art about, you know? So it's all interdependent. It all goes hand in hand.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the artists I really look up to are artists that utilize the techniques and their observations and symbiotically are able to create something unique to them through the mixture of those. Yeah, even with that guy, you know, like I think at least I can only speak for myself, but at least as I get older and more empathetic, I see someone like that that's like big and kind of aggressive, and I'm like, man, what kind of like trauma did this guy go through?
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
You know, and I think like fighting for so many years and training for so many years, for me, like I have the confidence to like disarm those situations in like kind of a comedic way. Like I was telling you, there's that one guy at the convention, and he was very like, he's a big dude, probably like 6'4" and maybe like 230 pounds. And he's just like kind of aggressive. When I was just sitting there at the booth, and then I was just kind of trying to spin things away where I could relate to him and be a little sarcastic. And then I just found out that he's just kind of an aggressive child, you know? I'm like, oh, this guy's just kind of like a kid, and he's just trying to relate in his own obscure little way. And I was just like, that's fine.
Yeah, I relate to that as well. Like, I'm big on empathy, always just remembering, you know, like this, I think of people a lot. Like when someone's a jerk, this person was once a child. They weren't always a jerk. They became a jerk or whatever. But at the same time, there's another part of it. Like when someone's, you know, just, you know, I don't have that. I just started practicing jujitsu a little bit, which has given me, you know, like a certain type of confidence for sure, like in physical situations. Yeah. But when you feel like someone wants to kick your ass, it's like, it's not, I don't know, like I don't have that confidence or whatever. It's just downright like uncomfortable.
Well, know? I mean, it's even like, you know, if you're in a conversation where people are talking about films and you've only watched 1 or 2 films. Yeah. I mean, you're only going to have so much to relate to. It's the same about, you know, it's just building vocabulary. Yeah. So when you know that you have the skill sets to be able to, if this situation were to come to it, this guy attacks me, I know exactly at that moment what to do. Exactly. You know, I have like 12 or 13 reference points of like, okay, if this guy leans this way, then I'll do this. Or if like he lunges into me, then I'll do this, you know? So.
No, that's awesome. You know, the thing with, like, you know, I did jujitsu, like, you know, I had to step away from it a little, but it's only for like a month and a half or something. But I think after like 3 classes, you know, like I was walking my dog in the park at night, and there was like an altercation between like 2 groups of guys. And I felt like a huge sense of confidence. I didn't have anxiety. And then I talked to a friend about it, and I walked right by them. And he's like, yeah, like that's, you know, that's pretty common for somebody that just started a martial art. And that's the perfect way to get your ass kicked. Because you think that you're far more confident because you learn to put someone in a chokehold. Yeah. But then you're going to get in a fight and you're going to get your ass kicked because you actually don't know anything yet. You know what I mean? But that confidence, that was impressive to me. You know what I mean? And so to actually have the skills, you know, like he said, fighting solves everything. And at first I had that, you know, reaction, like, you know, like what? Fighting doesn't, like what? And he was saying that, not the physical part, but it's just like, you know, like you were saying, like, you know, fighters tend to be calm or something. It's a thing where it's like the philosophies of it or whatever. You can manage life situations or whatever, like not panicking or whatever when things go down or whatever, like giving you I imagine like a sense of being centered and in control, even though we're always vulnerable or whatever, that you can manage the situation. And so that's the thing that I want to do more and more jujitsu, is because it was building that confidence where I feel like, just more confident, like walking in the world, that if, God forbid, anything did happen, I can negotiate it, like
Definitely.
whatever. I could be on the other side of it, as opposed to being vulnerable. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think like there's something really interesting that this mixed martial artist, Ryan Hall, he's like a world champion Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, and he's an undefeated mixed martial artist. Mm-hmm. And he said he was giving this, just like talking on YouTube, this video where he was saying, the best form of self-defense is being able to disarm it verbally. And it's true, because once you have that skill set, then you can just talk yourself out of the situation. And if someone does something, then you have this array of talents that you can just fall back on. But you just don't know. You don't know what's going to happen in that situation. Like in a street fight, someone can stab you. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're talking to me about the real Mr. Miyagi.
Oh yeah. Is that what we're going to talk about?
Yeah.
Shit.
So we just took a bathroom break, and now we're back on our Decoded. And so the real Mr. Miyagi. Why do you think that I would like this documentary?
Why would you like that? Can we talk about our bathroom experience instead?
Our bathroom experience. We were standing there right next to each other, peeing in different stalls. It was a joyous experience.
I guess what I think of with that is just courage. Like, this guy's journey, that it's just the thing of like taking a leap. It'd be way too much to get into the background of the thing. And if, you're going to watch it, I wouldn't want to ruin it. But, just somebody that just like totally, like he was in Japan with his family, this, karate master guy, and he goes to America to begin to try to start a business to support his family back in Japan, because I think it was after World War II or something. Like it was just like there's poverty and whatever. And so the thing was, he was just like, I just can't imagine. That's the one part that really catches me, is that he went there alone, not knowing the language. There was racism after World War II towards Japanese, in America after the internment camps. And he had to deal with that. Like he was a, authentic Japanese person, like not a Japanese American. And so like trying to buy property or whatever, he just had to deal with that stuff. But like I said, he couldn't speak English, very well. And just taking the little he had and coming to America. But then he becomes, everything worked out, like it's called the real Mr. Miyagi, because ultimately he became the stuntman for Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid. And actually they tried to get him, he was the first pick to be Miyagi. But the thing was, he read the lines and he was just like, oh, this isn't a supporting role or whatever. This is a lead role. And so that's where they got Pat Morita to play him. But then they developed a relationship, and Pat Morita, I forget this person's name, but he became Pat Morita's mentor basically. And so it's just a fascinating story. But the courage part, I think I'm so inspired by that,
Yeah. I think that's something that we have to, keep in mind, is that this journey is potentially a long journey,
Yeah.
just living in general. So, but yeah, I mean, there's always going to be struggles. Mm-hmm. People around you are going to die. Someone that you love very dearly will die, or you may get disease or whatever. But you just have to adapt in those situations. I guess, it's like the hero's journey. Everyone loves to hear those sort of stories. And I guess that's also why Greek mythology is so relatable still, is because it talks about just the plight of the human experience.
Yeah, that's the beauty of mythology. That's why it's always going to be relevant, because it's describing the human experience, It's like, who can't relate to that, Mm. And so, like, I love the hero's journey, the whole Joseph Campbell thing, because he breaks it down in stages, the calling, accepting the calling. And he takes all that from all sorts of, like cultures and times. and brings it all together, and it's still relevant to live your life, based on that. I definitely do. Like, I apply it, and it's just, like life is a journey, and like saying with trying, just really, I guess, stepping up to it. It is a struggle. There's victories, there's defeats, but the thing is just to, constantly move forward through all of it. It's never easy. Like, how can it be? Because, you're talking about, it's the nature of living, the nature of reality. Like, you're not just enjoy things, but, just try your best. And with myself, like having a sense of purpose in my life or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
It's interesting. I've been writing some stuff about this, just, how people are seduced by, superficial things.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times people don't break out of that. They're constantly seduced by that. And I think it's good to be aware that our exterior beauty will fade, but the interior beauty will last forever. And I think about that, and I equate that to just leaders, in the world that are elderly,
mm-hmm.
but people respect them so much because they worked on themselves and they've developed this specific perspective that transcends humanity, and is able to live on,
Yeah.
And hopefully with artwork, that's a case as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, man. Like with, I remember, it's a generalization, but somebody describing how around the age of 40, I think, physically the body begins to like change to a certain extent, getting older. And so there's a shift in the psyche, like that it goes from your focus was more superficial up to that point. Of course, that's not the case for like everyone or whatever, but then you just have to let go. And if you don't, you're going to suffer. And so then you start to give more priority to your, develop, like consciousness, developing that and just valuing that more. Of course, there's there's ways around that, like people resisting and getting surgeries done or whatever, or just becoming obsessed with the gym for the sake of having a cool body or whatever. But for myself, it's like I'm definitely in that place of I've gone through my superficial stage. I think it's just it's a cultural indoctrination thing. How can you not? Know, especially like in America and the West, the media and all that. I definitely like value that more and more, like at this point, just consciousness as opposed to the superficial. But it's interesting. It's an interesting like dichotomy, relationship between the two, the surface and, like I guess what's underneath the surface. Because, I think it's part of the human, whether it's biology or whatever, like, because we're visual people being attracted to things, purely for superficial reasons.
Definitely. Yeah.
But it's a whole thing, like I remember, the writer Ayn Rand, I was into her at one point, and she talked about prestige and how the insanity of prestige, where you're basically living your life to impress other people. So you get a nice car or whatever. You don't actually really care about that car, but your value in that car is that other people value it. Yeah, it's a crazy way to live, man.
Definitely.
You know what I'm saying?
But that's the thing is, I feel like a lot of people don't ever break away from those ideas.
Yeah.
And they're constantly plagued by this false notion of what it means to be human. And that's just part of the
something that it's my own thing with art, but it definitely it's like it rubs me the wrong way or whatever. It's like like the superficiality in that way of because I've had friends that just got caught up in that. I think it tends to be a lack of awareness, but just, like everything you do is taking someone else into consideration, like trying to make art for an audience or for a market or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, there's some friends that come to mind where they were doing, like okay or whatever, but their whole identity as an artist, unknown to them, I'm sure, was, like they didn't paint for themselves. And so they had the audience, they were, making a living, but then, like impermanence, like all things changed, the market changed, the audience wasn't there, it like started going down. So then what do? well, they stop making art and they have a breakdown or whatever, sadly. You know what I mean? So I've always, kind of been fortunate to be aware of that, like just to not compromise in that way, because that's got to be a terrible position to be in. So it's the same thing. I knew a guy that, like, he identified with his body so much. He had this really cool kind of bodybuilder Bruce Lee thing going on. And his whole identity was based around that. But then around the age of 50, he ended up getting a knee injury, and he had to just sit out. And he started getting depressed, started eating, smoking, put on weight. And it just like it forced him to go inside. But his whole life up to that point had been, relying on a more superficial type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, I mean, I think that's a good thing to be aware about, whether you're an artist or just human, is understanding the intention of why you're doing that thing that you're doing.
Yeah,
is it because you want to receive accolades and receive affirmations from people? And, why are you doing this social media post? Is it because you need that, to basically validate yourself? Or is it just icing on the cake? Because at the end of the day, a piece of artwork is not you. Yeah, it's your hand and your mind that goes into that, but it's an extension of you. It's not all of you. So if people like it or they don't like it, it's not really of your concern. That's just other people's judgment. That's a projection of potentially themselves onto that piece, So I think everything has to be taken with a grain of salt.
You know what I think with that? I forget that documentary, but I love that documentary. The Artist is Present.
Marina Abramovich.
Yeah. How do you say her name?
Marina Abramovich.
Okay. I won't try to say it. I can never say it. But that's what I took from it is just, I loved, like, she just became a mirror, like sitting in the MoMA, right? And people like just having like, their own like experience, but they're all projecting onto her, and she has nothing to do with it. You know what I mean? And I just love that, because it's like what you're saying with the painting or whatever. And so that's how I see it. And so, as an artist, you put yourself out there, and that's what you get back. You get back people's opinions, people's whatever. And it's just like, but it is just an aspect of people's own trip. What does it really have to do with you?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I think, that brings us kind of back to the beginning part of the conversation. It's tapping into that subconscious mind. Because if you're conscious about the way that people are going to perceive this, then you've already lost that subconscious state of being, So I think the more that you can tap into that unabashedly and just say, no, fuck that. I'm just going to do it, or not even necessarily be a renegade about it, but just have confidence that whatever you create, it's going to mean something, at least to you, and then hopefully people perceive that in a way that could reward you. But if not, then that's just how it goes. You're not in control of everything.
Yeah. I feel like there's a paradox there. Like, it's the irony of it. Like, it's, how would you say it? Like the thing, like when you might want something, but when you let go of that wanting, or you wish something, but it's like when you let go of pursuing it or whatever, and you just do whatever, that's when it happens. But the harder you try, the worse it gets. You know what I mean? And so that's the thing. But it's a really hard place to get to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's a really kind of like a weird idea. You know what I mean? But in my experience, it's key and it works. But even then, I find myself getting neurotic or whatever, getting caught up in my head of wanting something so bad and just forgetting all that and getting frustrated in the process. And as opposed to other times, I remember like in, for example, like in art school, this is where I kind of first learned this idea, like, like figure drawing. Model gets up on the stage and you get excited. It's like, oh, like the lighting's right, the pose, everything. Like, I'm going to do the best drawing, in your head. It's always the worst. And then other times you're not even thinking in those terms and you're just like drawing. And then it's just like, it comes out like flawless or whatever. Like, what's the difference there, right? It's that like, again, that like, like that overly conscious thing, like this is going to be the best, this is whatever. And just, as opposed to just letting things happen, man. But it's not easy, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
The thing with me in that, like, I try to contextualize these things. So one of those practices is I paint circles, and it's based on the Japanese, the Enso ring,
Yeah.
And so like, it's really fascinating the context is I get to witness my own mind. And so as an artist, when I do these circles, it's funny because I just like taking a cold shower, like the mind starts to talk, right? And I see it like it's so concerned with the result. Even though it's just a circle, it wants to do like a beautiful circle. It wants to do it perfect or whatever. And sometimes I'll do the circle and there's like one part that's off. And so, trying to like fix it or whatever, and it ends up ruining the circle because the whole thing is just one motion. And so that's the thing. I mean, that's the practice like of the Enso circle is the irony, the paradox is the perfect circle, the beautiful circle is the one where you've just like let go of that. And it's funny because I was showing a friend that, and he saw like, I didn't have to say it. He told me like when I did one, he saw that there was like just the most subtle hesitation in it. You know what I mean? And he told me that, and I was just like, man, it's like you could see my mind. There was, because I was thinking about you when I did it. You know what I mean? And so, I love a practice like that because it's just getting to a place where it's just, no thought, but it's absolute thought at the same time. It's hard to describe.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the Tao, isn't it?
Yeah, it is the Tao. The Tao is everything.
The Tao is everything. The Tao is all things.
The Tao is all things, and it's nothing.
Yeah, it's everything and nothing at the same time. What an interesting paradox that we've embedded in ourselves. Been thinking about imperfections recently, and I think the more that we allow ourselves to understand that we're perfect in our imperfections and let go of these things that we're trying to hold on to, we'll probably be happier and more at peace within ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it's just like, it's such a, like, I think it's such a high ambition in a funny way, It's like, it's easy to say, it's easy in concept, but to become that, like, I absolutely agree. It's just, it takes so much work to get to a place like that.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm going to ask one more question.
Yeah, please.
Do you have any advice for artists or creatives?
Mm-hmm. Is that the question?
That's the question. That's the whole question.
That's such a broad question.
I know, but that's why it's open to interpretation.
It's hard. It's funny because the question like that, it changes like probably from year to year as I change. Man, I don't even know how to answer that at this point. I mean, the irony here is, right, just fucking answer the question and like don't like the conscious control or whatever, like what comes to mind. I guess, okay, so let me take a stab at it. I mean, why not? If anything, you don't put this in because my initial like answer, which I don't want to say because it's I guess it's one-sided. And I don't like to give one-sided answers or whatever because it becomes like advice, I guess. But like my own thing with like a person that wants to become an artist, is that the question?
No, I just said, do you have any advice for artists or creatives or?
Okay, so as an artist, no, I don't have an answer, man. I don't have an answer. Shit.
Everyone will have to fill in their blank right now, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate you, and I'm glad that we were able to meet through maybe 4 years ago now.
Was it that long?
Or was it maybe 3 years ago? I think it was in the end of 2017.
I'm so bad with time.
Yeah, but appreciate you, and everything kind of comes full circle. Kind of like your Enso circle.
Yeah, dude. No, thanks for having me here. And I mean, this is always fun. It's a great opportunity just to talk. And I love talking about, like life, art, and And
advice.
Yeah. And not giving advice.
Yeah.
But thanks for having me on, for the second time. So